He invited a poor girl to pretend at his ex's engagement, but her kindness silenced the millionaires. Hello, everyone. Before we begin today's story, I have a small favor to ask. Please hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our channel's new videos. It is quick, free, and the best way to support us in bringing you more dramatic stories. Your support means the world to us. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. Now, let us return to tonight's main character. It was nearly midnight in downtown Chicago when Ethan Grayson, 32 billionaire CEO of Grayson Holdings, sat alone in a corner booth of an upscale hotel bar. The rain drummed against the glass, blurring the skyline beyond. His jaw was tight, his tie loosened, and in front of him sat a half-empty glass of whiskey he had barely touched. Across the room, laughter erupted a familiar voice. His ex-fiancée, Charlotte, the woman who had left him a year ago to marry into another elite family, was celebrating her engagement tonight, just one floor above. Tomorrow, every financial paper would print the photo of her smiling on another man's arm. Ethan had planned to ignore it. He had planned to be indifferent, but indifference was harder to drink than whiskey. He was about to stand when a soft voice broke his spiral. "Excuse me, sir, are you ready for your check?" The waitress, mid-20s, dark hair tucked behind one ear, eyes too honest for this kind of place, held the tray with both hands. Her name tag read Maya. She looked tired, like someone who had worked 3 shifts in a row. Ethan studied her for a second, longer than necessary. "Actually," he said, voice low, "I need a favor instead." Maya blinked, uncertain if she had heard right. "A favor?" He nodded once, leaning forward. "I have an event tomorrow night. I need someone to play a part. You would come as my date." She let out a soft laugh, thinking it was a joke, but his expression did not change. "You want me to pretend to be your girlfriend?" He placed a business card on the table. "You will be paid well. 6 months of your salary for one evening. You only need to smile, say little, and stay by my side. No strings, no expectations." Maya's lips parted in disbelief. "Why me?" Ethan's eyes flickered, weary but sharp. "Because you are the only person in this room who does not know or care who I am." The rain outside grew heavier, filling the silence between them. Maya hesitated, glancing at the card. She thought of the hospital bills stacked on her kitchen counter, of her mother waiting for another surgery that insurance would not cover. The money he mentioned could change everything, but still pretending? For a stranger? "It sounds wrong," she murmured. Ethan leaned back, unbothered. "It is only an act. Everyone at that event is acting, Miss Lee. You would simply be better at it." His words were cool, detached, but there was something behind them, an ache she could not name. She swallowed, clutching her notepad like a shield. "And if I say yes?" He pulled out an envelope, sliding it across the table. Inside was a deposit check already signed. "Then we meet at the Grand Celeste Hotel, 8 p.m. sharp. Dress code is formal. Do not be late." For a moment, she just stood there, the sound of rain and jazz mingling in her head. Then she nodded once, almost to herself. "All right, I will do it." Ethan gave a single nod, finishing his whiskey in one slow motion. "Good, I will send a car." As Maya walked away, her heart pounded faster than her footsteps. She had no idea that what began as a one-night contract would unravel everything she thought she knew about power, pride, and love. And somewhere behind her, Ethan Grayson finally smiled for the first time that night, not because he had won, but because something about her had already begun to disarm him. The next evening arrived faster than Maya expected. Her hands trembled slightly as she zipped up the pale blue dress she had rented with part of the deposit Ethan had given her. It was nothing like the gowns she imagined women in his world would wear, but it was the best she could manage. She looked at herself in the cracked mirror of her small apartment, whispering, "Just smile, say little, and stay by his side." When the black town car pulled up outside her building, neighbors peeked through curtains as she stepped in, clutching her small purse. The city lights blurred through the window as the driver guided her to the Grand Celeste Hotel. Inside, chandeliers glowed like stars and violins played softly in the distance. The lobby smelled of perfume, champagne, and money. Ethan was waiting near the marble staircase, wearing a charcoal gray suit. His presence filled the room, calm but commanding. When his eyes met hers, something flickered surprise, maybe admiration. "You are on time," he said simply. Maya nodded, unable to find her voice. He offered his arm. "Shall we?" The ballroom doors opened to a cascade of laughter and light. Hundreds of guests mingled beneath gold-trimmed ceilings, glasses clinking in polite toasts. It was a world far from hers, every movement polished and rehearsed. Ethan leaned close enough for her to hear over the music. "Remember what I told you. Stay close. Smile when I introduce you. And no matter what anyone says, do not let them see you nervous." She nodded again, heart pounding as they stepped into the crowd. The whispers started almost immediately. "Who is she? She is not from around here. Grayson's new fling?" Each word felt like a pinprick. Maya kept her chin high, her arm looped through his, remembering the rule: say little, smile. At the far end of the ballroom stood Charlotte, radiant in a silver gown, her hand resting possessively on her fiancé's arm. When her gaze found Ethan, her smile faltered, just for a breath. "Ethan," she greeted when they approached. Her voice was smooth, polite, but her eyes flicked to Maya, scanning her from head to toe. "And who might this be?" Ethan's tone was even. "Maya Lee, my partner." The word partner hung in the air like a challenge. Charlotte's fiancé, a sleek investor with a perfect grin, chuckled softly. "Well, congratulations, old friend. Quite the upgrade from your usual boardroom meetings." A few guests laughed. Maya felt her face burn, but before Ethan could respond, she took a breath and spoke. "Kindness has a strange way of changing what people value, does it not?" The table went silent. Charlotte blinked, taken aback. Ethan looked at Maya with quiet astonishment. The music swelled again, filling the awkward void. Later, when they escaped to the terrace, he handed her a glass of sparkling water instead of champagne. "You handled that better than most executives I know," he said. Maya shrugged lightly, the city wind brushing her shoulders. "I just said what I felt. I do not like watching people being cruel." For the first time, Ethan's lips curved into a real smile. "Neither do I." Below them, Chicago stretched in glittering lines, alive and indifferent. Inside, laughter resumed, but out here, it felt like the world had slowed down for just the two of them. "Tomorrow, the tabloids will talk," he murmured. "They always do." Maya looked at him, steady. "Then let them talk. You said it yourself. It is all an act." He turned toward her, his eyes softer now. It was Miss Lee. But for a moment back there, it did not feel like one. The words lingered between them, quiet but undeniable, as the night wind carried the faint echo of violins from the ballroom below. The next morning, sunlight spilled through the glass walls of Grayson Tower. Maya stood awkwardly near the reception desk, clutching the visitor badge that read her name. She had been summoned by Ethan's assistant for a brief follow-up, though she had no idea what that meant. When the elevator doors opened, she stepped into a world of quiet luxury marble floors, minimalist art, and a view of Chicago that made her heart skip. Ethan was standing near the window, sleeves rolled up, a cup of black coffee in his hand. He turned when he heard her. "You came," he said, not as a question, but as if he had expected her to. "You asked me to," Maya replied, trying to sound calm. "I wanted to thank you for last night," he said. "You handled yourself with more grace than most people born into that room, but—" His voice lowered, more serious now. "If we are going to continue this arrangement, we need to make it official," she frowned. "Continue?" Ethan walked to his desk and set down a folder. "Charlotte's engagement has created a public storm. The media will not stop with one appearance. They will want to see us again, together, for credibility's sake." Maya blinked, processing his words. "So you want to extend the act?" "Yes. A 3-month contract. Appearances at events, photos, statements. You will be compensated accordingly." He opened the folder, revealing a crisp legal document, 5 pages of clauses and fine print. Clause 1, he read aloud, confidentiality. Clause 2, public cooperation. Clause 3, emotional boundaries. No personal involvement. Ever. Maya stared at the paper, the weight of the words pressing against her chest. "And if I say no?" Ethan's gaze did not waver. "Then the media will tear you apart, Miss Lee. They will assume you are after money. This agreement protects you as much as it does me." She took a slow breath. Every instinct told her to walk away, yet something deeper curiosity, perhaps, kept her still. "I will sign," she said quietly, "but on one condition." "Which is? You treat me like a person, not a prop." For the first time since they met, Ethan hesitated. Then he nodded. "Deal." She picked up the pen, her signature small but firm at the bottom of the page. "Good," he said, closing the folder. "Our first appearance as a couple will be this Friday at the company's charity auction. Dress code, black tie." "Another gala," she murmured under her breath. He almost smiled. Get used to it. The week that followed was a blur. A stylist arrived at her apartment with racks of designer dresses and boxes of heels she could barely walk in. An etiquette coach spent 2 afternoons teaching her how to hold a champagne flute and dance without stepping on anyone's shoes. Ethan, though reserved, attended every session, watching from a distance as Maya tripped, laughed, and stubbornly tried again. One evening, after the coach left, she muttered, "You know, normal people do not have to learn how to smile for photographs." He looked up from his tablet. "You are not normal people anymore, Miss Lee." "Then maybe that is your problem," she said softly. He said nothing, but his expression shifted. Something flickered behind those calm gray eyes. Friday came faster than either of them expected. The auction hall was grander than the engagement party, filled with cameras and investors. This time Maya did not flinch under the attention. Her movements were smoother, her smile steadier. Ethan's hand rested lightly at her back as they posed for photographers. When a reporter asked, "Mr. Grayson, how did you two meet?" Maya glanced up at him, waiting for his lead. Ethan hesitated, then said, "By accident. But sometimes accidents lead to the right places." The flashbulbs erupted again. Hours later, as they left through the side exit, Maya whispered, "You almost sounded sincere." He met her gaze, half amused, half disarmed. Maybe I was. For a heartbeat, neither moved. The city hummed around them, but the air between them had changed warmer, more dangerous, like the thin line between business and something that no contract could define. The following weeks unfolded like scenes from a life that was not hers. Maya found herself stepping out of black cars, smiling under camera flashes, and sitting beside Ethan at meetings she barely understood. The contract had started as a wall between them, yet somehow it began to feel like a bridge. He was distant in public but quiet and kind in private, correcting her posture before events, holding the door a second longer than necessary, or leaving her favorite tea on the conference table without saying a word. One afternoon, after another exhausting photo shoot, Maya slipped off her heels in his office and sighed. Do people actually enjoy living like this? Ethan looked up from his laptop. Some do. Most just pretend. She chuckled softly. Then maybe I am good at pretending too. He set his laptop aside and studied her for a moment. You do not pretend, Miss Lee. That is what makes you inconvenient. Their eyes met. The silence that followed was not uncomfortable, just charged, full of words neither dared to say. Later that week, the company held a private dinner for board members. Ethan asked her to attend, reminding her again of the rule's smile. Listen, speak only when necessary. She arrived in a simple black gown, elegant but understated. The room buzzed with conversation until one voice rose above the rest. So this is the famous girlfriend. A shareholder smirked, swirling his wine. Tell me, Miss Lee, do you know what a merger is? Laughter followed. Maya felt the heat rise in her cheeks. But before she could answer, Ethan's voice cut through the room, cool and measured. She knows integrity, which is more than I can say for some investors. The laughter died instantly. Maya turned to him, startled. For a man who rarely raised his voice, the defense meant more than she could say. Later, outside the restaurant, she stopped him near the valet stand. You did not have to do that, she said. Yes, I did, he replied quietly. You are under my name now. What they say to you, they say to me. The streetlight reflected in his eyes, turning the gray into silver. Besides, he added, you handled yourself well. You did not run. She smiled faintly. You told me not to. A soft laugh escaped him, low and real. I did I not? It was the first time they laughed together, no cameras, no audience, just two people standing in the cold night, pretending less and feeling more. As days passed, Ethan began inviting her to places outside the contract quiet lunches, evening walks near the river, a visit to the art museum where he once went alone to think. Maya noticed things he never said out loud, the way he paused before every painting of a storm, the way he avoided calls from his father's law firm, the faint tiredness that never left his eyes. One evening, while they sat on a park bench watching the city lights reflect off the water, Maya asked softly, why do you really do all this? The parties, the press, the pretending. Ethan leaned back, his gaze on the skyline. Because people expect me to. Because if I stop, they will eat me alive. Power does not make you free, Maya. It makes you trapped in better clothing. She watched him for a moment, realizing this was the first time he had ever said her name without the distance of Miss Lee. You do not have to be who they expect, she said. Neither do you, he answered. The words hung between them like a fragile truth. A week later, during another charity banquet, Maya caught Ethan looking at her across the table, not with the practiced politeness of a businessman, but with something real, something human. It scared her more than the cameras ever did. Because in that glance, she saw the one thing neither of them had prepared for feeling. And in that moment, she finally understood why the third clause of the contract, the one about emotional boundaries, was written in bold. It was not to protect him from scandal. It was to protect them both from each other. The next big event came sooner than either of them expected. Grayson Holdings was celebrating its 10th anniversary, and the guest list was filled with reporters, investors, and socialites who thrived on scandal. Ethan knew this night would test the contract more than any before. For Maya, it felt like walking into a storm she could not see but could already feel in her bones. The ballroom shimmered in gold and ivory, cameras flashing like lightning as they entered arm in arm. She wore a midnight blue gown that caught the light when she moved, a gown chosen by Ethan himself. "You look," he began, then stopped, clearing his throat. "You look appropriate for the occasion." Maya smiled, amused by his careful choice of words. "Thank you, Mr. Grayson. You look appropriately terrifying." He laughed quietly. "Then we are even." They made their rounds, greeting guests, posing for photographs, pretending to be a perfect pair. Everything was smooth until Charlotte appeared. She was radiant, dressed in silver again, her fiancé beside her. Her smile was flawless, but her eyes glinted like glass. "Ethan," she said sweetly, "and Maya, was it? You make quite the headline lately." Maya returned a polite smile. "I suppose people enjoy a good story." "Oh, they do," Charlotte replied, voice sharp behind the sweetness. "Especially the ones where fairy tales do not last." Ethan's expression hardened, but before he could speak, Maya placed a gentle hand on his arm and turned to Charlotte. "Then perhaps it depends on who writes the ending," she said softly. For a moment, even Charlotte had no response. Later that evening, when the speeches began, Maya watched Ethan stand under the crystal chandelier, thanking everyone for a decade of trust and partnership. His voice was steady, his presence magnetic. But when his eyes found hers across the room, something in them shifted, like the man who built empires had finally remembered he was human. After the applause faded, Ethan excused himself from the crowd and found her on the terrace overlooking the city. "You handled yourself perfectly," he said, his tone softer now. "You make it sound like a performance," she teased. "Is it not?" he replied. "For me, maybe, but you were real back there." She looked out at the skyline, the wind pulling a strand of hair across her cheek. "Maybe I forgot to act." He reached out instinctively, brushing the hair aside. His hand lingered, his voice barely a whisper. "You should not make it so hard to keep my own rules." The world seemed to stop. The sounds of the city faded, replaced by the quiet thrum of two hearts, trying to stay within the lines of a contract that no longer made sense. Then, as if the universe remembered its script, the terrace door opened. A photographer stepped out, snapping a picture before either could react. The flash broke whatever fragile peace had existed between them. "Mr. Grayson, Miss Lee," the photographer stammered. "The press would love a few more shots together inside." Ethan's jaw tightened, but he nodded. "Of course." As they walked back into the ballroom, Maya whispered, "That will be everywhere tomorrow." "Let it," he said under his breath. "I am tired of pretending that what they see is a lie." That night, as the city slept under a blanket of headlines waiting to be written, Ethan and Maya found themselves on opposite sides of the same truth. The rules they had lived by were no longer walls. They were just paper-thin, fragile, and ready to burn. The next morning, the world woke up to chaos. News outlets and gossip sites were flooded with headlines. "Billionaire Ethan Grayson spotted in intimate moment with mystery woman." The photograph from the terrace was everywhere, Ethan's hand gently brushing Maya's face, her eyes half closed in the soft glow of city lights. To the public, it looked like love. To the board of Grayson Holdings, it looked like scandal. Ethan arrived at the office before sunrise, tie loose, phone ringing non-stop. His assistant followed him with a stack of newspapers. "They are demanding a statement," she said. "Investors are calling for damage control." Ethan's jaw tightened. "Tell them I will handle it personally." When Maya arrived a few hours later, security hesitated before letting her in. The whispers had already started. Some called her an opportunist, others a homewrecker, though she had done nothing wrong. She walked past the murmurs and stepped into his office. Ethan stood by the window, the skyline behind him. "I am sorry," she said quietly. "It was just one picture." He turned to face her, his expression unreadable. "One picture can destroy everything, Maya." She swallowed hard. "Then tell them the truth. Tell them it was not real." His silence was heavy. "Can you?" she pressed. "Can you lie that easily?" He looked at her for a long moment before replying. "I have been lying for years. It is how I survive in this world." "Maybe that is the problem," she whispered. "You do not live in it anymore." The words hit him harder than she expected. Later that day, Ethan was summoned to an emergency board meeting. Charlotte was there too, seated beside a few senior investors who now questioned his leadership. She slid a printed copy of the photo across the table. "You are reckless, Ethan," she said. "Your personal life is now affecting the company's image." "My personal life is my own," he replied coldly. "Not anymore. When you signed those contracts, your life became a product," one of the board members added. "We cannot afford another scandal." The vote was swift. Ethan was suspended temporarily from public duties pending review. When he returned to his office, Maya was gone. On his desk lay her access badge and a handwritten note. "I never meant to hurt you. Maybe you were right. We were just acting, but somewhere along the way, I forgot it was pretend. I hope you find what is real again, Maya." For the first time in years, Ethan sat alone, without knowing what to do next. The city outside moved as it always did, cars rushing, phones ringing, people chasing things that would never fill them. He looked down at the contract they had both signed, the ink still visible, the words, "no personal involvement," mocking him. That evening, he drove aimlessly until he found himself at the riverside park where they had once talked about freedom. The bench was empty, but the memory was not. He could almost hear her laugh, soft and unguarded. In that moment, Ethan realized something painful yet freeing. He had spent his whole life controlling everything, business, image, people, but he could not control the one thing that mattered: feeling. The next morning, reporters waited outside his building, shouting questions about the photograph, the scandal, the suspension. Ethan stopped, looked straight at the cameras and spoke clearly. "There was no scandal. There was only honesty. And if honesty cost me everything, then so be it." Then he walked past them, no longer hiding behind glass towers or scripted smiles. Somewhere in the city, Maya watched the interview on a small television in her apartment. She did not smile, but her eyes softened. For the first time since she met him, she believed he was telling the truth. Weeks passed, and Ethan Grayson's empire began to tremble under the weight of rumors and half-truths. Investors pulled out, the media spun every story, and the man once called untouchable was now painted as a fool blinded by love. Yet, behind the noise, something in him had changed. He no longer cared about protecting an image that never felt like his. Instead, he focused on rebuilding, quietly meeting employees, listening, learning what his empire had become while he was busy pretending to control it. But the absence of Maya haunted him. Every cafe reminded him of her laughter. Every moment of silence echoed with the words she had left behind. One rainy evening, he returned to the park where they once Saturday, the city lights shimmered on the water, and in his hand was the contract they had both signed. He stared at the line that once separated truth from performance, then tore it clean in half. "No more pretending," he murmured. The next day, an unexpected visitor arrived at Grayson Tower, Charlotte. She looked different, less polished, more human. "You are making a mistake, Ethan," she said. "You think walking away from this company will fix you, but it will not." He met her gaze calmly. "Maybe not, but at least it will make me honest." Charlotte sighed. "You really did fall for her, did you not?" He did not answer, and that was answer enough. Meanwhile, across the city, Maya had started working at a community art program for underprivileged youth. The pay was modest, but her heart felt lighter. She spent her days painting, teaching, and for the first time she was not pretending to belong anywhere. One afternoon, while helping a student clean up brushes, her phone buzzed with a message from an unknown number. It was a link to a live-stream Ethan Grayson speaking at a press conference. She hesitated before clicking, but curiosity won. On the screen, Ethan stood before a crowd of reporters, looking composed but unguarded. "I have made mistakes," he said. "I built my life on control and forgot what integrity meant. But a woman reminded me that strength is not silence. It is honesty." The room fell quiet. Grayson Holdings will be restructured into a foundation supporting education and community art. It is time to invest in people, not power. Maya's eyes widened as he continued. "Some stories begin with contracts. The real ones begin when you tear them apart. The reporters erupted with questions, but Ethan simply smiled and stepped away from the podium. Across the city, Maya closed her phone, her heart racing. That night, as rain fell against her apartment window, she whispered to herself, maybe he finally found what was real. For the first time in weeks, she smiled, not because she missed him, but because she knew he was no longer lost. 2 months later, the world had moved on, but Ethan Grayson had not forgotten. The scandal had faded, the foundation was gaining praise, and the city's elite had turned their attention to newer gossip. Yet, none of it mattered to him. What mattered was the quiet sense of purpose that had replaced the noise. For the first time in years, he was building something that did not need headlines to exist. One afternoon, his assistant entered his office with a file. The board approved the first community center, she said. It will open next week. Would you like to attend the ceremony? Ethan paused, glancing at the photo attached to the file. It was a bright, renovated warehouse turned into an art studio. The sign on the front read, "The Open Hands Program." His heart skipped. That was the same name Maya once mentioned when she talked about her dream of teaching art to children. Without hesitation, he stood up. "Yes," he said, "I will attend." The following week, he arrived at the event unannounced. The room buzzed with laughter and color. Paintings lined the walls, and children's drawings hung from strings like little flags of hope. At the center of it all stood Maya, sleeves rolled up, covered in streaks of paint, helping a young girl clean her brushes. She looked peaceful, radiant in the simplest way. When she turned and saw him, the world seemed to still. "Ethan," she whispered, disbelief in her eyes. "What are you doing here?" He smiled softly. "I heard about your program." It seemed familiar. "You named the foundation after it," she said quietly. "I wanted to honor the person who gave me the idea," he replied, "and to tell her that she was right. About everything." Maya hesitated, unsure how to respond. "You do not have to say that." "I do," Ethan said. "You changed the way I see the world. You reminded me that worth is not measured in money or power. It is measured in what you give back." A small crowd had gathered, watching silently, but neither of them cared. He stepped closer, his voice lowering. "The foundation's success does not matter if the person who inspired it is not part of it. I want you to lead this program, Maya. Not as an employee, but as a partner." Her eyes widened. "Partner? Yes," he said. "And not just in work. In life, if you will let me." Maya looked at him, her heart pounding. "What about your rules, your contracts, your conditions?" Ethan smiled. "I tore the last one apart, remember? This time, there are no terms, just trust." The room erupted in applause as she nodded, tears filling her eyes. For the first time, the powerful billionaire and the once struggling waitress stood side by side, not as a story built on pretense, but as two people choosing honesty over fear. The cameras flashed again, but this time, neither of them flinched. They had already rewritten their ending. 1 year later, the story that once began as a contract had become a legacy. The Open Hands Foundation now funded programs across the country, helping young artists find their voice just as Maya once had. Every wall of the foundation's headquarters was lined with color and life, but one painting stood at the center of the main hall, a portrait of two hands reaching toward each other, signed simply, "For those who choose kindness over fear." On a crisp autumn evening, the foundation hosted its anniversary gala. This time, there were no hidden agendas, no paparazzi waiting for scandal, just people gathering to celebrate something good. Maya stood near the stage, wearing a simple ivory dress, her hair tied back loosely, the way Ethan always liked. She was giving final instructions to volunteers when she felt a familiar presence beside her. Ethan, now more at ease than the man she had met a year ago, smiled warmly. "Everything looks perfect," he said. "That is because we did it together," she replied. The evening unfolded with laughter, speeches, and stories of lives that had changed because two people once decided to stop pretending. When the music softened, Ethan stepped onto the stage. "Ladies and gentlemen," he began, "tonight is not about wealth or power. It is about second chances. A year ago, I was a man who thought success meant control. Then I met someone who showed me that real strength is vulnerability, and real love is built on truth." The crowd fell silent, waiting. Ethan turned toward Maya. "Maya Lee, you walked into my life when I least deserved kindness, and you gave it anyway. You taught me that the greatest investment is not in companies or buildings, it is in people, in hearts, in hope." He reached into his pocket and pulled out something small, a simple silver ring, no diamonds, no extravagance, just a symbol. This is not part of any contract. There are no terms, no signatures, no conditions. Only a promise to walk beside you honestly through whatever comes next. For a moment, Maya could not move. Her eyes filled with tears as she stepped forward, the entire room watching in silence. "Ethan," she whispered, her voice trembling, "you already kept the only promise that mattered. You became the man you were meant to be." She took the ring, and the crowd erupted in applause. Ethan drew her into his arms, and for the first time their story did not feel like a performance, it felt like peace. The cameras captured the moment, but neither of them looked at the flashes. They looked only at each other. Outside, the city lights shimmered across the river, the same place where once a billionaire and a waitress had sat as strangers trying to find meaning in a world obsessed with status. Now they stood as partners, equals, proof that love built on honesty could survive anything. And as the night drew to a close, Ethan whispered the words that began it all, but this time with a smile. "No more contracts, Maya, just us." The audience rose in standing ovation, and somewhere between the applause and the music, their love story found its quiet, perfect ending.